I was halfway through reading the ads section of the Gazette to Wolfe, one of those morning rituals that meant nothing to him and everything to his digestion, when the phone cut in. Wolfe's eyes, sunk in the gloom between the Oxford Book of English Verse and his breakfast beer, rose half an inch. "Archie," he said, "the instrument vibrates." "You don't say," I told him and reached for it. "Mr. Goodwin." The voice was female, young but sand-papered at the edges. "You don't know me, but we had an appointment. At least we were supposed to." "That's an interesting way to start a confession," I said. "When did I miss it?" "Last night. The Glass Orchid Bar. 8 o'clock. You never showed, and now they say he's dead." If Wolfe's eyebrows ever developed a conscience, that word would have been the spark. He put his book aside with the delicacy of a man laying down evidence in court. "Who's dead?" I asked. "Mr. Rayner, Carl Rayner. He said you could help." A pause, breathing sharp enough to cut wire. "Please, I can't talk on the phone. Someone's watching the building." She gave me an address on West 56th before the line choked into static. Wolfe's voice landed like a slow verdict. "You had an appointment last night?" "I had a sandwich last night. That's the extent of my social calendar." "Then," he said, "the woman's delusion may be fatal. To her, if not to your leisure." He lumbered toward the globe, extracted Montenegro brandy, and poured 2 fingers with surgical precision. That was his way of saying the case had already taken the room. "Archie, find out whether a man named Carl Rayner is in fact dead. Should he be alive, discourage him from becoming otherwise." 10 minutes later, Lon Cohen confirmed it. Rayner, art dealer, shot once in the chest outside the Glass Orchid around 9. No witnesses who'd talk. I gave Wolfe the summary while hunting for my coat. He listened, eyes half closed, breathing like a metronome. "An appointment you never kept," he mused. "I dislike coincidences so eager to introduce themselves. Then maybe I'll go tell them to leave a card." Fritz appeared at the doorway with a tray of liver pâté and the expression of a man watching civilization unravel. "Lunch will be delayed if Mr. Goodwin goes gallivanting." "So will the rent if he doesn't," I said. Outside, the air was wet enough to pass for soup. A cab hissed up, and I gave the driver the address the girl had spilled. The Glass Orchid occupied the first floor of what used to be a church. Neon where saints once stood. Inside, the smell of gin and brass polish was doing business. The bartender remembered Rayner. Said he'd been waiting for someone who didn't show, got an envelope delivered, opened it, and left looking like he'd swallowed the headline page. Half an hour later, bang, alley, bullet, obituary. "Envelope?" I asked. "Gone. Cops took it. Said it was empty." That last word has a way of echoing if you let it. I didn't. I slipped him a bill for memory maintenance and moved toward the door, where a cab would be pretending it hadn't seen the rain. That's when I saw her. Same voice, no phone this time. Standing under the awning in a coat too thin for October, eyes scanning the street like every car was a threat with wheels. She looked up, saw me, and her mouth shaped the single word that every detective hates most when it's spoken too soon. "Run!" She grabbed my sleeve before I could decide which direction "run" was pointing. Her fingers were cold and shaking like they'd forgotten how to hold on. A cab screamed by, splashing a gallon of city across both of us, and she used the distraction to pull me toward the alley. I let her lead for 3 steps, then stopped her dead with one hand on her arm. "Hold it. I don't run until I know who's chasing me." She looked over her shoulder. "You don't understand. He's here." "Lady, I don't even know who you are, much less who he is." Before she could answer, a black sedan nosed out from the curb, lights off, crawling like it was trying not to exist. A window slid down, and something glinted just enough to erase my doubt. I grabbed her by the coat and pushed us both flat against the wall. The sound that followed was short and persuasive. One shot, muffled but close enough to taste the powder. When the sedan peeled off, leaving exhaust and nerves behind, she was breathing like she'd swallowed glass. I looked down at her. Now start over. Who are you and why am I a suspect in your near-death experience? I'm Evelyn Rayner, she said. Carl's was my brother. That gave the rain a little more company. And you thought I had a date with him? He said he was meeting someone named Goodwin. He left saying it would solve everything. She clutched her bag. When I saw you at the bar... You didn't see me at the bar, I cut in. That's the whole problem. She blinked, realizing how bad her story sounded to anyone sober. Then who was he supposed to meet? That, I said, is going to be Wolfe's favorite question. We took a cab back to the brownstone because Wolfe doesn't like surprises, but loves contradictions. She didn't speak for most of the ride, which was fine. I prefer my passengers conscious but quiet. When I opened the door, Fritz looked at her like she was a rare fish someone had smuggled in without a permit. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He was in the red chair, dictionary at his elbow, looking as though logic itself had just dropped in for lunch. Miss Rayner, I said, this is Nero Wolfe. He charges by the truth, not the hour. She gave him the short version, edited by fear and exhaustion. Wolfe listened, without blinking. When she finished, he said, Your brother was murdered after arranging an appointment with someone named Goodwin. That coincidence alone requires scrutiny. Mr. Goodwin, attend. I attended. He swiveled a finger toward her. You said an envelope was delivered. Describe it. It was white, thick. Carl said it contained photographs. Proof of something that could ruin a man named Kessel. Wolfe's eyelids lifted a quarter inch. You are referring to Mr. Morton Kessel, the financier? Yes. Ah. Wolfe leaned back. A man who endows museums to atone for what he acquires. I said, Lon mentioned Rayner dealt in art. Kessel's one of his clients. That could be our bridge. Not bridge, Archie. Motive? Wolfe murmured. If a photograph endangered Mr. Kessel, the contents of that envelope are now the most valuable absent object in New York. Evelyn pressed her hands together. You think Kessel had Carl killed? Wolfe's eyes drifted toward her like heavy curtains. I think speculation is the refuge of the helpless. We will proceed by fact. You will provide your brother's correspondence, records of any transactions with Mr. Kessel, and the names of those who knew of this supposed proof. Archie will retrieve them. I nodded. You sure you don't want to come stretch your legs, just to see what daylight looks like? No. Didn't think so. He flicked a finger toward the phone. Before you depart, call Inspector Kramer. Inform him that a young woman has retained us in relation to the Rayner homicide and that we intend to cooperate, up to the edge of prudence. Evelyn looked up sharply. You're calling the police? I am acknowledging their existence, Wolfe said dryly. It spares us the nuisance of being accused of concealment later. Kramer answered with the tone of a man already annoyed at the concept of my voice. When I told him, there was silence, then a grunt. If Wolfe's mixed in this, it's because there's something worth hiding. Tell your genius boss not to sit on evidence. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. He might dent the cushion. After the call, I helped Evelyn with her coat, which felt more like a courtesy than necessity. She paused at the threshold. Mr. Goodwin, if it wasn't you my brother was meeting, who was it? I don't know, I said. But whoever it was knew my name. And that's the part I don't like. Outside, the rain hadn't improved its manners. We found another cab, this one smelling faintly of yesterday's lunch. Evelyn gave me her brother's studio address, a converted warehouse near the river. The building was dark except for one square of light on the second floor. The door wasn't locked. Inside, canvases leaned like tired witnesses. The smell of turpentine and secrets filled the air. A desk waited near the window, neat as a tax audit, except for one thing, a photo torn in half. The left half showed Kessel, unmistakable, hand extended to someone now missing from the picture. The right half was gone, along with whatever truth it carried. Evelyn's breath hitched. That's his handwriting. She pointed to the back where Carl had scrawled, "If Goodwin doesn't show, deliver to Wolfe." I looked at the piece of paper and felt my stomach tighten. Someone had borrowed my name as their key into a murder. "Miss Rayner," I said, "your brother's appointment may have been the one I didn't keep, but somebody made sure it was kept anyway." I didn't touch the photo right away. In my line of work, you learn that anything left behind in a dead man's studio might as well be wired. I took out my handkerchief, flipped it over, and used the corner to pick it up. The torn edge was too clean to be accidental. It had been cut, not ripped. Someone had wanted only half the truth preserved. Evelyn stood by the window, watching the street as though the night itself might lean in. "He wrote your name." "Why would he?" "Because he trusted someone who didn't exist," I said. "Or because somebody made sure he did." She turned. "What are you going to do?" "Take this half to Wolfe. He's allergic to exercise, but not to inference." I slipped the fragment into an envelope from the desk drawer and sealed it. The act earned me a whisper from behind, a faint click that didn't belong to the room. The door was closing. I reached for my revolver, but whoever had been there was already gone. "Stay put," I told her, and moved fast enough to catch a shadow at the stairwell. Male, medium build, hat pulled low, coat collar up. When I hit the sidewalk, the only proof of him was the echo of footsteps and a smell of cheap tobacco curling into the rain. I came back up. Evelyn hadn't moved, but her color was worse. "Someone's following us," she said flatly. "Then we're interesting," I told her. "That's progress." We left through a side door and caught a cab headed uptown. I called Wolfe from the first payphone we passed. He answered like he'd been waiting on the ring. "Well," he said, "we've got half a photograph, half a lead, and half a chance before someone makes us the rest of it. I deplore arithmetic as a narrative device. Return at once." When we reached the brownstone, Fritz had already retreated to his culinary Switzerland, leaving Wolfe at his desk with a look that meant the orchids could wait. I put the envelope down, and he opened it as if it might try to lie. He tilted the torn photo under the lamp. Mr. Kessel's hand, extended to whom? That's the mystery. The back says the whole photo was supposed to come to you if I didn't show. Then Mr. Rayner was aware that he might not survive the evening, Wolfe said. A sensible precaution if poorly executed. Evelyn clasped her hands tightly. "You think Carl knew he was in danger?" Wolfe lifted his eyes just enough to acknowledge her. He either feared death or anticipated betrayal. The two emotions often share a wardrobe. I said, "Kessel's due for a visit. You want me to ask what kind of pictures he's paying to keep out of circulation?" "No," Wolfe said. "I want you to make him believe that the other half of this photograph is not destroyed." "Which it isn't," I said. "Indeed, but he must not know that we know." He leaned back, templed his fingers, and his voice went low. "Tell Mr. Kessel you represent the estate of Carl Rayner. Imply you are in possession of material his lawyer might prefer unseen. Gauge his reaction. Note every tremor. That's blackmail dressed for dinner." "It is strategy," Wolfe said mildly. "Blackmail requires intent to profit. We intend to expose." Evelyn looked from one of us to the other, like a witness who'd wandered into the wrong courtroom. "You'll be careful." "Miss Rayner," I told her, "I'm always careful. I just don't always look it." Wolfe added, "You will return directly afterward. I must observe whether Mr. Kessel's guilt ripens with pressure or shrinks from light." I left with a raincoat, the torn photo, and a stomach that didn't like its own forecast. Kessel's building on East 72nd had a doorman who looked bred to keep people like me outside. I flashed a business card and the phrase Rayner Estate, which worked like garlic on superstition. 5 minutes later, I was in Kessel's office. Glass, steel, and enough expensive emptiness to echo. Kessel came in, tall, silver-templed, the kind of man who could insult you and make it sound like a compliment. "Mr. Goodwin, you said you represent the late Mr. Rayner." "That's right." He sat, steepling fingers. "And what, precisely, is your business with me?" "Let's say it's about a photograph. Half of one, to be exact." That did it. His hand twitched once. Small, but there. "You have it?" "I didn't say that. I said I know where it was meant to go." His eyes sharpened. "If you're implying—" "I'm implying nothing, Mr. Kessel. I'm informing you that if Rayner's death wasn't an accident, somebody took something that doesn't belong to them, and I'd rather it didn't turn up attached to another corpse." Kessel stood, walked to the window, and took exactly 3 breaths before speaking. Mr. Rayner was an opportunist. He photographed what he shouldn't have, tried to sell it, and paid the price. That's all you need to know. "I appreciate the summary," I said, rising. "I'll let Wolfe know you've written your own obituary draft." His head turned sharply. "Wolfe?" "Nero Wolfe is involved." "He just reads the funnies," I said, and walked out before his answer could spoil the line. Back in. The cab. I ran through what I'd seen. Hands, voice, eyes. Kessel wasn't a man startled by guilt. He was startled by timing. Someone else had played the photo first. When I got home, Wolfe was halfway through a bottle of beer and half a paragraph of logic. "Report," he said. I gave it all to him, start to finish. He listened, chin propped, lids heavy. "So, Kessel expected you, or at least expected that someone would come under that pretext. Which means someone else used my name." "Precisely. The imposter arranged the meeting with Rayner, then ensured it ended fatally." Wolfe's voice slowed to a purr. "An identity borrowed for access, a photograph for leverage, and an art dealer who had learned too much. Deliciously untidy." Evelyn spoke softly from the corner. "Can we go to the police now?" "No," Wolfe said. "The imposter remains unknown and the photograph incomplete. Inspector Kramer would only scatter the pieces before we know their shape." I leaned back in my chair. "Then what?" "Then," he said, "we lure the imposter to us." That's when the bell rang, one short, one long, impatient. I went to the door, figuring Kramer had scented fresh irritation. It wasn't him. Saul Panzer stepped in, rein on his hat, and handed me a folded sheet. "Pick this up off the wire service," Saul said. "Figured you'd want it first." It was a police bulletin. Second homicide, same gun, same caliber, same clean job. The victim, Morton Kessel. Wolfe took the bulletin from my hand as if Saul had just passed him the final piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle, only to discover it belonged to another box. His eyes skimmed the page, then climbed slowly to Saul's face. "You are certain?" Saul nodded. "Straight from the precinct wire. Shot once in the chest. Same caliber, same distance. Kramer's got the shakes." I said, "That makes 2 men who met Goodwin under false pretenses and ended up ventilated." "Pfui." Wolfe laid the bulletin flat, smoothing it like it had offended him. 2 men who were both connected to the same photograph. Our imposter has accelerated his schedule. Evelyn's voice broke the air like thin glass. "Then it wasn't over. Carl's death, Kessel's too, it's all precise," Wolfe cut in. "Murder committed not for blood, but for control. Someone eliminates those who might expose or compete for the object in question. Mr. Goodwin, sit down. We must distill this while the broth is hot." I did. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips steepled, eyes nearly closed. The air was thick with that special brand of silence he manufactures when his brain is cooking. Saul watched him like a man who'd seen the recipe before but still enjoyed the performance. "Saul," Wolfe said at last, "you will visit the precinct, not Inspector Kramer. He is at present unfit for useful speech. Go to Pearly Stebbins. Obtain every detail of Kessel's death, our witnesses, and whether any object was removed from the scene. Got it. Saul tipped his hat and vanished, leaving a damp draft that smelled of street and rain. I looked at Wolfe. So now what? Wait for Saul to bring dessert? Impatience, he said, is not initiative. He tapped the photograph fragment still on his desk. This, Archie, has become both our bait and our clue. We must identify the missing half. Evelyn came forward hesitantly. Could it show the killer? Unlikely, Wolfe murmured. More probably, it depicts an act or alliance Kessel sought to conceal. If Rayner attempted blackmail, his death silenced him. Kessel's followed to erase further evidence. Yet both were pawns. The true player remains hidden, our imposter, who masqueraded as you. That last part made the back of my neck itch. Yeah, that part's personal. Someone out there's wearing my name like a badge and leaving corpses in its wake. Indeed, Wolfe said. Therefore we shall reverse the arrangement. You will become the bait. I gave him a look. Fine. How do you propose I advertise myself? Business cards that say, next victim. Not at all. You will make yourself visible where the imposter expects invisibility. Attend the precinct's outer office when the press descends on Kramer. Reporters will hound any man connected to the case. Ensure that at least one account mentions that you, he paused for effect, have recovered the complete photograph and intend to deliver it to the police tomorrow morning. Evelyn gasped. But we don't have the whole photograph. Precisely why it will be effective bait, Wolfe said. Those responsible will seek to obtain it before dawn. I sighed. And I assume I'll be the night clerk. You will not leave the brownstone. The announcement itself suffices. Fritz will bolt the doors. Our visitor will come to us, not the reverse. It wasn't the first time Wolfe had used his home as a mousetrap, but this one felt particularly ambitious. Evelyn looked ready to protest, then swallowed the words. Saul returned 2 hours later, soaked, tired, and carrying a fresh piece of trouble. Kessel was shot in his penthouse at about 9:30, he said. No witnesses, no sign of forced entry, but Stebbins found powder burns on the right sleeve of the bodyguard, Larry Timmins. He's missing. That, Wolfe said softly, is encouraging. Encouraging, I said. One bodyguard short of a full deck doesn't sound like progress. Archie, you misapprehend. Timmins' disappearance implies foreknowledge. He is either the assassin or his next intended victim. Either way, we have a live piece on the board. Saul added, Kramer's chewing nails. The press will blow by morning. He said, and I quote, if Wolfe's hiding anything, I'll subpoena his orchids. That would at least ensure they're properly documented, Wolfe said. Archie, place the call. I knew which one. Lon Cohen owed me favors and column inches. It took less than 3 sentences to plant the story. Anonymous source. Private investigator claims possession of critical photograph linking Rayner and Kessel murders. Will surrender to police at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Lon grunted, promised ink, and hung up. When I turned, Wolfe was watching the clock. Excellent, now we shall eat. Fritz! Dinner was trout with butter sauce, which might have been comforting if the circumstances hadn't promised company after midnight. Evelyn pushed food around her plate like each bite required clearance. Wolfe demolished his serving in silence, which meant his brain was still performing calculus with human motives. Around 11, the city outside went muffled. Even the rain seemed to hush, as if waiting for a cue. Fritz locked the windows. Saul vanished into the hall shadows with a revolver, and I stationed myself by the front door. Evelyn sat on the couch, coat folded beside her like a passenger she might need to flee with. Midnight stretched thin. Wolfe's breathing from the office was the only sound, steady as a clock that paid no attention to nerves. I had begun to think the trap was empty when the bell chimed once. Short, precise. Not the kind of ring a stranger gives, more like an appointment kept. I signaled Saul with a glance. He melted toward the kitchen passage. I opened the door halfway. A man in a grey coat stood there, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, face pale from the cold or something heavier. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. The voice was steady but dry. "My name's Timmins." That straightened the hairs on my arm. "You picked an interesting night to drop by." "I read the paper," he said. "You've got something that belongs to me." "That depends what something means." He reached into his coat, and for a second I thought the night was about to get noisier. Instead, he produced an envelope, sealed, damp, and addressed to Nero Wolfe. "I found this in Kessel's study after it happened," he said. "Didn't dare take it to the cops. Figured you'd know what to do." Wolfe's voice came from behind me, smooth and heavy as velvet. "Bring it here, Mr. Timmins." The bodyguard hesitated, then stepped inside. Saul closed the door silently behind him. Wolfe gestured toward the desk. Timmins laid the envelope down like it might detonate. "Open it, Archie." I slit the seal carefully. Inside was the missing half of the photograph, and it was worse than we'd hoped. The other figure shaking Kessel's hand wasn't a stranger. It was Karl Reiner. Only the background gave it context. A warehouse filled with paintings stacked like currency. Everyone stamped U.S. government property. Recovered, Europe, 1945. Wolfe exhaled once, deeply. "Looted art," he said. "Kessel and Reiner were partners in theft disguised as restitution, and someone has now erased the record." Timmins stared at the photo, jaw tight. "Then I'm next." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "Unless you remain here, where murder prefers not to tread uninvited." But I saw it then. The glint of movement at the window, the small circle of reflected light. Someone outside had a bead on the room. I lunged, pulling Timmins down just as the glass shattered. The shot cracked the night wide open, and the envelope went spinning into the air. The glass hadn't finished raining when I dragged Timmins under Wolfe's desk. A splinter nicked my cheek, and the next shot buried itself in the frame of Wolfe's favorite landscape of Montenegro. That would annoy him more than the bullet. Saul was already moving, 2 strides to the light switch, darkness swallowing the room except for the thin glow of the aquarium behind Wolfe's chair. "Stay down," I muttered to Timmins. But he didn't need coaching. He was breathing like a man trying not to exist. Wolfe's voice, low and composed, came from somewhere near the wall. "Archie? Yeah? Do not damage the orchids." I'll try to restrain my urge to wrestle the gunman among the begonias, I said, and peered through the gap in the curtains. The street was empty except for the memory of motion. Whoever fired had used a silencer and good timing. Saul slipped out the kitchen door like smoke. I heard it open, then close again, almost noiseless. Evelyn had ducked behind the couch, one hand pressed over her mouth. I gave her a nod that was supposed to mean "it's fine," though it was about as convincing as the mayor's promises before Election Day. Wolfe said, "Lights, please." I flicked one lamp on, careful to stay out of the window's line. The room looked like it had survived a domestic argument between artillery pieces. Timmins stared at the bullet hole as though it might explain the shooter's motive. "They know," he whispered. "They knew I was coming here." "That's a reasonable deduction," I told him, "but let's save hysteria for when they start aiming better." Wolfe moved to the desk, slowly but with the authority of gravity returning to the planet. "Mr. Timmins," he said, "this assault demonstrates 2 things. First, that the conspirators fear exposure. Second, that you are now an inconvenience of diminishing value. Sit." Timmins sat. He was shaking, but the kind of shaking that comes from exhaustion, not fear. "I was supposed to protect Kessel," he said. "He told me the art deal was legal. After the first threat, I warned him to back off. He laughed, said money's the only museum anyone respects." Wolfe gave a small grunt. A witticism unworthy of repetition. Who made the threat? I don't know. The calls came from a payphone. The last one said if Kessel didn't hand over the negatives, someone else would. Negatives, I repeated. So there were more photographs? Dozens. Rayner shot them years ago when they were unloading the crates. Kessel kept the originals locked in a safe. Wolfe's eyes half closed, and those negatives, if recovered, would establish precisely which paintings were stolen and by whom. Exactly, Timmins said. That's why they killed him, and Rayner. Evelyn stepped closer, voice tight. Then my brother wasn't blackmailing anyone. He was trying to return what was stolen. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Virtue and folly are often indistinguishable when viewed posthumously. Saul returned, dripping rain, coat clinging to him like a second conscience. Shooter's gone, he said. No car engine, no footsteps after the second shot. Whoever it was had cover on the corner, maybe a service alley. I'll check with the cab stand down the block. Do so, Wolfe said. But no gallantry. If our marksman remains nearby, I prefer you alive. Saul nodded and disappeared again. Wolfe eased into his chair. Archie, the photograph fragment. Did you secure it? I patted my jacket pocket. Got it before we hit the deck. The envelope's got a fresh hole through it, though. Adds character. Excellent. Bring it. He examined both halves under the desk lamp, fitting them edge to edge with surgeon-like precision. The join matched perfectly. The handshake between Kessel and Rayner was complete, and the stolen art crates behind them looked damning enough to hang half the upper crust. Wolfe murmured, So, the impostor posing as you sought this evidence. He could not allow either Rayner or Kessel to live. He must now suspect that one copy remains. Therefore, he will come again. Fine, I said. Next time I'll charge admission. Archie, resist flippancy. It obscures thought. The impostor must have access to police reports, the press, and perhaps even our communications. He knew where Rayner would be and when. That suggests an insider, or one of your acquaintances who relishes impersonation. Most of my acquaintances can barely spell my name, I said. That narrows it down to everyone. Evelyn's eyes moved from Wolfe to me. So, what happens now? Now, Wolfe said, we prepare our invitation. He dictated instructions with the crispness of a military order. Saul was to phone Lon Cohen and leak a follow-up to the earlier report, that the photograph had been fully restored and delivered to Inspector Kramer personally. Meanwhile, I was to carry an exact duplicate of the envelope, empty, to police headquarters at dawn and make certain it was seen by every uniform between the front desk and Kramer's office. The idea was to convince our phantom that the evidence had left Wolfe's custody. Evelyn frowned. Won't that put you in danger again? Sure, I said, but I get hazard pay and sarcasm. Wolfe ignored me. Mr. Timmins will remain here under Fritz's reluctant guardianship. Miss Rayner, you as well. You are both now targets. Archie's visibility will divert attention from this house. I said, and what if our impostor decides to finish his work tonight instead of waiting for breakfast? Wolfe's eyes met mine, flat and calm. Then you will ensure he regrets the decision. That ended the meeting. Fritz brewed coffee strong enough to stop hearts and left us with a tray. Wolfe took one cup, sipped, and said, Archie, the impostor is clever but vain. He assumed your name because it carried access and reputation. You must now use both to expose him. Tomorrow's charade must be convincing without becoming permanent. Meaning you'd like me to survive it. That would simplify matters, he said. Around 2, Saul called in from a payphone. Got something. Cab stand boy says a sedan picked up a guy right after the shots. Tall, gray coat, driver in uniform cap. License started with H4, commercial plate. He thinks it was from the Winston garage over on 53rd. Wolfe's head tilted slightly. Archie, at dawn, you will perform your decoy errand. Thereafter, Visit that garage and discover which company maintains a car with that plate. If it belongs to a client connected to Kessel's acquisitions, we shall have our phantom stable." Saul's voice crackled faintly. "Want me to tail the garage tonight?" "No. Come here instead. The night is too charitable to snipers." The line clicked. I poured the last of the coffee and leaned on the desk. "You think this Winston garage leads real?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that murderers who hire cars cannot resist bookkeeping." He looked toward the window where the bullet hole still winked in the lamplight. "Archie, fetch the putty. Fritz's cooking smoke will not compensate for drafts." I patched it while he dictated a short note for Kramer, ostensibly reporting the attack, but phrased to conceal everything that mattered. Wolfe's version of honesty usually came shrink-rapid. When it was done, the house went still again, the smell of coffee mixed with rain and cordite. Timmins sat rigid in a chair, staring at the halves of the photograph like they might reassemble into absolution. Evelyn had fallen asleep on the couch, exhaustion winning over fear. Wolfe closed his eyes, not to rest, but to think. The clock reached 4. The city outside was beginning to lighten, faint grey pressing at the edges of the window. I checked my gun, my hat, and my patience. Wolfe spoke without opening his eyes. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Be eloquent when you lie to Kramer. He despises truth poorly dressed." I grinned, turned off the lamp, and left him there among the orchids and silence. The street had that washed-out grey look that belongs to New York between sins. I hailed a cab, climbed in, and told the driver, "Police headquarters, Homicide Division." Tone flat, hat low. The envelope Wolfe had given me felt like it was buzzing in my pocket, even though it held nothing but stationery. Being bait gives you a certain appreciation for worms. At the desk, Sergeant Stebbins was already scowling, which saved him the trouble of adjusting his expression. "Goodwin," he said, "Kramer told me to tell you if you show up before noon, he's going to shoot you for saving him the paperwork." "Tell him to pick a clean wall," I said. "This visit's official. Wolfe wanted him to know the photograph's safe." "Yeah?" Stebbins' eyes narrowed. "Then why are you smirking like you stole Christmas?" "It's the season," I said, and leaned just enough for the other officers to see the envelope. That was the point. Visibility. Stebbins grunted, rolled his eyes, and let me pass through the bullpen where every typewriter in New York was trying to outshout its neighbor. I made sure at least 3 people noticed me hand the envelope to Kramer's secretary, who marked it down, stamped it, and left it on the stack marked pending. Perfect. Kramer himself appeared a minute later, red-faced and chewing on a cigar stub that looked older than my bank account. "Goodwin," he growled. "Wolfe's too fat to come down here, so he sends his wisecracker." "What's this now?" "Just a token of affection," I said. "Wolfe figured you'd want something tangible on the Rayner Kessel case. Don't open it till you've had breakfast." He snatched the envelope and weighed it. "You think I don't know when you're playing games?" "I think you're the only one who'll enjoy finding out," I said, and tipped my hat. His face was working through 4 shades of disbelief as I walked out. The secretary and 2 reporters had seen the exchange. The seed was planted. Outside, I caught another cab and rode uptown toward 53rd and the Winston garage. The city was shaking off sleep, neon giving up to daylight, and the air still carried the taste of last night's rain. The garage stood half a block wide, 3 floors, iron gates open. A kid in overalls was hosing down the concrete like he was baptizing it. "Morning," I said. "You handle commercial plates, H4 prefix?" He squinted. "Yeah, you a cop?" "Private," I said. "Client wants his driver checked. Name's Harold, uniform cap, gray sedan. Could be one of Winston's fleet boys. Ask the office." The office smelled of oil and old invoices. Behind the counter sat a man with shoulders like a bread truck. His badge read, J. Pratt. "You need a rental?" he asked without looking up. Not exactly. I'm tracing a car, H4271. Picked up a fare from West 35th around midnight. Know it. He paused halfway through his coffee. Yeah, that's ours. Chauffeur's name's Reese. Didn't come back till after 2. Where'd he drop the fare? Pratt frowned. Didn't say. Signed the log private client. You know how that goes. Half the city thinks they're spies. Mind if I see the signature? He turned the logbook around. The handwriting was blocky and firm, no flourishes. Just R. Reese. The column for client name was blank, but the initials in the remarks box caught my eye. AG. I said, interesting initials. You always get drivers who like to imitate detectives? Pratt looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Means someone used my name last night and 2 men died because of it. If your driver's smart, he'll be in another city by now. If he's not, he's still got the gun that did it. Pratt's color drained half an inch. Wait, you saying Reese is mixed up in murder? I'm saying he's been mixed up with the wrong crowd. You got his address? Yeah, sure. Queens, near Astoria. But if this is serious, I'm calling the cops. Do that, I said, and headed for the door. Just make sure you spell my name right this time. Back in the cab, I phoned Wolfe from a diner payphone, catching him mid-breakfast. Found the car, belongs to a chauffeur named Reese, signed his fare as AG. Looks like our imposter was riding the back seat last night. Wolfe said. And the driver? Address in Astoria. You will not go there. That's half my job description. You will not, he repeated. If our adversary has discarded his disguise, you may encounter him prematurely. Return here. Bring Mr. Panzer. You're the boss, I said, though my tone filed a formal protest. When I turned from the phone, a man in a tan coat was watching me through the diner window, not staring, just too still, like he was waiting for the right page of the script. I stepped out and crossed the sidewalk fast. He pivoted, pretending to light a cigarette. Got a match, I said. He turned his head, showing me a smile that was polite enough to be false. Sorry, buddy, don't smoke. Then he dropped the cigarette he didn't have and started walking. I followed half a block. He looked back once, saw me, and ducked around the corner. When I turned it, the street was empty except for a delivery truck rumbling away. That sealed it. Someone was tracking the bait. I climbed into another cab and gave the driver Wolfe's address, eyes on the mirror, all the way. No tail I could see, but that meant nothing. Professionals know how to vanish between reflections. When I reached the brownstone, Fritz had the door half open before I knocked. Mr. Wolfe says hurry. He's been pacing, which is terrible for the carpet. Wolfe was at his desk, the half-photograph on one side, the Morning Gazette open on the other. Kramer telephoned, he said. He was displeased to discover your envelope contained only blank paper. I expected no less. He also confirmed that a man named Reese has not reported for duty since dawn, and his employer's garage has been contacted by the police. You have succeeded, Archie. Our imposter will now believe the photograph is in Kramer's custody and that his only remaining risk lies with those who know too much. I leaned against the globe stand. Meaning us, Timmins, and Miss Rayner. Precisely. Which means we shall receive a visitor before nightfall. Evelyn appeared from the kitchen, pale but steady. Then you're sure the killer's coming here? Wolfe looked at her the way astronomers look at comets, interested but unmoved. My dear, murderers are creatures of habit. They destroy to erase consequence. When rumor proclaims the photograph is beyond reach, the final reflex will be to eliminate those who can identify it. Therefore, he reached for the intercom switch. Mr. Panzer, position yourself near the basement door. Mr. Goodwin, prepare the front entrance. Fritz will, reluctantly, arm himself with the carving knife. Nothing like household unity, I said. Wolfe's eyes flicked up, glinting. Tonight, Archie, let us test whether intellect is adequate armor against desperation. The phone rang then, sharp, single, insistent. Fritz froze mid-step. Wolfe nodded, and I picked it up. A man's voice came through, low and deliberate. "Goodwin, you don't know me, but I know you. You've got something that doesn't belong to you." "Stand in line," I said. "Leave the house door unlocked tonight. If you don't, the girl dies first." The click was soft, final, and left the air heavier than gun smoke. I looked at Wolfe. He met my eyes without surprise, just a long, measured calm. "So," he said, "the worm takes the bait. Excellent." Wolfe didn't move. His hand rested lightly on the edge of the desk, fingers steady as though he were listening not to the silence, but to the way it settled. "Archie," he said, "lock every door except the front. If our caller intends performance, let him believe the stage is set." "Sure," I said, "but I'd like to know if the show's going to be matinee or midnight." "Both," Wolfe murmured. "Murderers seldom keep bankers' hours." Fritz was pale but defiant. "I will not have blood in the kitchen." "You won't," I told him. "You'll have it on the rug, which cleans easier." He disappeared, muttering about heathens and revolutions of the stomach. Evelyn was still standing by the wall, one hand against the wallpaper like she needed proof the house was solid. "He's coming here," she whispered. "That's the rumor," I said. "You might want to pick a good hiding spot. Wolfe's library has more dead authors than live witnesses." "I won't hide," she said. "Carl died for this. I'm not running from whoever killed him." Her voice had the kind of shake that makes a man both admire and worry about her. Wolfe's eyes, however, stayed half-lidded. "Your bravery is noted," he said. "Now please remove yourself to the rear room. Mr. Panzer will accompany you." Saul appeared at that cue, expression calm as a tax return. "I've checked the alley." "No one yet." "Then he is waiting," Wolfe said. "And waiting, like fear, requires patience. Archie, bring the revolver and extinguish every light save the one above the desk. Our visitor will be guided by habit, the rumor of Wolfe behind his fortress of books." I obeyed. The room fell into that peculiar half-darkness where shapes exist but don't admit to it. The lamp threw Wolfe's bulk into amber relief, a statue with a pulse. Outside, the street lamp cut a thin wedge through the curtains. The city hummed faintly, indifferent. It took 20 minutes before the first sound came, a soft metallic scratch at the latch. I could feel the vibration more than hear it. Wolfe didn't blink. I stood behind the door, gun raised, breath short. The lock clicked once, twice, and the door edged inward. He came in fast, confident. Grey coat, brim low, gloves on. A man who'd practiced invisibility until it became muscle memory. His hand held a pistol, but it wasn't pointed yet. He shut the door behind him and stepped closer to the desk. "Wolfe," he said, "we're going to make this simple." Wolfe's voice came like smoke. "Simplicity is the refuge of the dull. Please, proceed." The photograph. "You hand it over. Everyone here walks away. You hold it, and she dies first." I came out from behind him before he finished. The barrel of my revolver pressed cold into his back. "Cute rehearsal," I said. "Now drop the gun." He didn't freeze like amateurs do. He pivoted a fraction, slow and deliberate, until I could see his jawline in the lamp glow. Clean shave, angular, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Recognition hit me in the gut. "Reese," I said, "the chauffeur." He smiled without humor. "Mr. Goodwin, you've been impersonated better than you imitate yourself." "Yeah? You had my name. I've still got the looks." He turned his head slightly, watching Wolfe. "You fed me to the press, didn't you? Made it look like the photo was with the cops. That was clever. I'm flattered, Wolfe said. Your approval is worth so little, yet it costs you so much. Reese's expression didn't change, but his knuckles did, white tightening on the grip. You don't understand. That picture ruins everything. It doesn't just show Kessel and Rayner. It shows me. I was the one arranging those shipments. I thought it was clean work until I found out whose paintings they really were. Then Kessel panicked. Rayner threatened exposure, and you— His eyes flicked to me, gave me the perfect disguise. When he said he was meeting Goodwin, I made sure he did. Wolfe's tone went glacial, and when Kessel threatened to reveal your name to his partners, you removed him as well. Predictable. Reese took one step closer, aiming the gun now. Predictable works. Where's the photo? The next voice didn't belong in the room. It came from behind the couch, crisp and sudden. Right here. Evelyn stepped out, both halves of the photo in her hand. Her face was pale, but her aim was perfect. She held Wolfe's revolver I'd left on the side table, both hands steady. Reese stiffened. Put it down. No, she said. Carl died for this. You don't get to erase him again. Evelyn, I said, this is not amateur hour. Let's trade weapons before somebody redecorates the rug. Her jaw tightened. He killed my brother. The air went electric. Wolfe didn't move, but his voice sliced through it like a scalpel. Miss Rayner, I commend your courage, but not your judgment. Lower the revolver. Now. She hesitated, breath trembling. Reese shifted, calculating distance and chance. That's when Saul appeared behind him, silent as an apology, and brought the butt of his gun down on Reese's arm. The pistol clattered to the floor, and I kicked it away before it could argue. Reese twisted, elbow catching Saul's shoulder, but he wasn't built for persistence. 2 seconds later, he was pinned against the wall, gasping like a fish that realized it was bait all along. Evelyn dropped the revolver. The sound it made was small and final. Wolfe let out a long breath, the first since the door had opened. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. Inform him we have concluded his investigation for him. Reese spat the words. You think he'll believe this? I'll tell him you doctored that photo. Wolfe's brow rose a millimeter. You mistake me for a man who needs belief. The negatives will suffice. Where are they? Reese shut his eyes. Jaw clamped. Saul pressed his wrist a little harder. Talk, I said. In the glove box of the sedan, Reese muttered. It's parked 3 blocks over, Lexington, near 45th. I was going to burn them tonight. Wolfe leaned back. Then our work is mercifully brief. Saul, retrieve the negatives. Archie, accompany him. Mr. Timmins will remain as assurance. I will handle the police with the usual delicacy. Reese turned his head toward me, blood on his lip. You think you've won, but you're just another thief collecting trophies. Maybe, I said, but I've got better taste. We bound him with Fritz's clothesline, much to Fritz's verbal suffering, and left him under Saul's guard. Evelyn sat in Wolfe's chair like it was the only solid surface left in the world. Her eyes followed us as we headed out. On the street, the air had sharpened, dawn flattening the city into mirrors and steel. Saul and I moved quick, quiet. When we reached Lexington, the gray sedan waited by the curb, dew on its hood, innocence on its face. Saul popped the glove box, and there they were, a packet of negatives wrapped in brown paper, marked in Rayner's neat script. Saul whistled softly. This is it. Yeah, I said, watching the empty street. Now let's get them home before the morning news beats us to it. Behind us, a bus rolled by, horn wailing. It drowned the faint sound of a footstep that came from across the street. Someone who'd been waiting, watching. The sun touched glass, and for an instant I saw a reflection, a figure in black, hand raising something small and metallic. Down, I shouted. The shot hit metal instead of us. It sparked off the sedan's fender with a whine that could have doubled as my heart beat. Saul and I hit the pavement, sliding behind the car's bulk. The second bullet bit into the curb, close enough to spray grit against my cheek. Saul grunted. Across the street, behind that delivery truck. I leaned low, peered past the bumper. A figure ducked behind the rear wheel of the truck, a pistol steady in one hand. I couldn't see the face, only the deliberate control in the movements. Whoever it was, they weren't guessing. They were cleaning up. "Cover me," I said. "Archie, that's dumb," Saul muttered. "So go ahead." He raised his gun, cracked off one round to keep the shooter's head down. I slid along the sidewalk's edge, keeping the sedan between me and a quick obituary. When I reached the corner, I bolted into the doorway of a tailor's shop and came out behind the truck. One look around the bumper and the puzzle's final piece looked back at me. Inspector Kramer's shadow wouldn't have known her, but I did. Evelyn Rayner, raincoat buttoned, hair wild, eyes blazing, the kind of look that makes grief look like vengeance wearing lipstick. "Put it down," I said quietly. She didn't. "You shouldn't have followed me." "You shouldn't have been shooting at me," I said. "It's bad form for clients." Her jaw trembled once, then steadied. "You don't understand. You were going to give it to the police. They'd bury it, just like they buried Carl." "Try me," I said, stepping out. Saul's gun was still covering from the far side, but I waved him down. She lowered the weapon half an inch, but the fury didn't fade. "Carl told me about the paintings, about what Kessel and that driver were doing. He wanted to expose them, then he got scared. He said someone else was helping them, someone inside the Bureau of Cultural Recovery, someone feeding shipment lists. That's why he wrote your name, Mr. Goodwin. He thought Wolfe could keep him alive." I took another slow step forward. "So you found out the truth after he died?" "Yes. I found his notebook hidden in a frame at the studio. The negatives were listed there, but I didn't have them. When Timmons came here, I followed him. I thought—" Her breath caught. "I thought Wolfe was protecting them. I saw Reese's gun. I thought you were all on the same side." "Lady, that's an accusation I usually reserve for Kramer," I said. "If I were on Reese's side, I'd be dead by now." Her eyes flicked to Saul, who was closing in quietly from behind. "Don't," I warned. "She'll fire if she thinks she's cornered." Evelyn's grip on the gun tightened. "You don't know what it's like," she whispered. "All those paintings, masterpieces, hidden, traded like poker chips. My brother tried to do one decent thing, and they shot him for it. You think the police will punish them? They'll call it restitution paperwork. I wanted proof, not a funeral." "I believe you," I said. "But Wolfe doesn't lie about evidence. He sent me for those negatives to hand over clean. Not sell, not hide. Deliver. That's the difference between what Carl started and what you're about to finish." Her mouth opened, then shut. The gun drooped a few inches. That was enough for Saul to move. He stepped forward, quick as reflex, and caught her wrist. The weapon clattered to the pavement, and she crumpled beside it, sobbing without sound. Saul looked at me. "You sure she's not part of it?" "No," I said, "but she's done firing practice for the night." He nodded, picked up the gun, and slid it into his coat. I helped her to her feet. She felt lighter than anger should. "You're going back to Wolfe's," I said. "He'll decide what happens next." She didn't argue. That was the loudest confession of all. We hustled her into the cab and told the driver to keep the meter running like his life depended on it, which, given the last hour, wasn't exaggeration. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz opened the door wide enough for Surprise to escape. Wolfe was in the office, same position, same calm, but his eyes shifted when he saw her. "She has been busy," he said. "I heard 2 shots." "She's got good aim," I said. "Just bad logic. She thought we were protecting the people who killed her brother." Wolfe studied Evelyn as she sank into the chair opposite his desk. "Miss Rayner, Your grief has unfortunately been weaponized. You have acted with folly, but not malice. Mr. Goodwin, the negatives. I handed him the brown packet. He opened it delicately, spreading the strips across white paper under the lamp. The images, reversed and spectral, revealed their secrets even in negative form. Crates stamped with military seals, paintings uncrated in warehouses, men cataloguing them with falsified manifests. Evelyn whispered, "That's Carl's handwriting on the labels." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and his courage in each exposure." Timmins, still bandaged and bound to the chair near the bookshelf, raised his head. "You've got what you want. Let me go. I'll tell the police everything." "You will tell Inspector Kramer," Wolfe said, "but not yet. I prefer to shape the truth before handing it to blunt instruments." Saul leaned against the wall. "So Reese confesses to the murders. Kessel and Rayner are the principals, and Timmins is clean-up crew. Case closed?" "Not entirely," Wolfe said. "There remains the unseen hand, the Bureau insider Miss Rayner mentioned, the one who arranged the shipments and ensured their silence. He is the source, the organizer, and, I suspect, the mind behind Reese's impersonation of Archie." I frowned. "And you've got a name?" "I do now." Wolfe's voice was a low thunder. "The labels on these crates list the recovery liaison as D.L. Hargrove, a name which appears as signatory on every return manifest from the European sector in 1946. Mr. Hargrove presently serves as Deputy Director of the Cultural Reclamation Fund, an office whose phone number, incidentally, appears twice in Rayner's notes." I whistled softly. "That's a long reach for murder." "Long reaches are common among thieves," Wolfe said, and his assistant, Reese, performed the manual labor while our Mr. Hargrove managed the laundering. When Rayner threatened exposure, Hargrove arranged for his elimination using Reese's borrowed identity as Goodwin. The pattern is simple, the execution less so. Evelyn's voice shook. Then, "He's the one who—" "Yes," Wolfe said, "and he will come for these negatives as surely as the tide returns to shore." He placed them carefully in the safe behind the globe. "Which means, Miss Rayner, you must stay here. We are not yet finished." I looked at him. "We could just call Kramer now and hand him the whole package." "We could," Wolfe said, "but I prefer my meals complete. Kramer would consume the appetizer and discard the main course." "We will wait. Mr. Hargrove will soon realize Reese has failed, and curiosity will compel him to verify the failure himself." Saul smiled faintly. "You mean he'll walk into the trap?" "Precisely." The phone rang again, slicing through the quiet. Fritz answered from the hall and brought the receiver in. "For you, Mr. Goodwin." I took it, already bracing for Kramer's voice, but the one that came through was too calm, too polite. "Mr. Goodwin," it said, "this is Daniel Hargrove. I believe you've come into possession of some materials belonging to my office. It's imperative I speak with you, discreetly." I glanced at Wolfe. His eyes gleamed like a man hearing the dinner bell. "Of course, Mr. Hargrove," I said. "How soon can you be here?" "In 20 minutes. "Fine," I said. "Front door will be open." When I hung up, Wolfe's mouth curved, half amusement, half contempt. "Archie, see to it that it is not merely open. See that it is welcoming." I said, "You mean the kind of welcome with a net or with a bullet?" "Whichever arrives first," Wolfe said. The phone's click still hung in the air when Wolfe said, "Fritz, clear the dinner tray. Mr. Hargrove shall not see crumbs when he arrives to meet his ruin." His tone carried that familiar composure, half formality, half appetite. I slid my revolver into the shoulder holster and checked the cylinder. "If you're right," I said, "this guy's either desperate enough to kill or clever enough to talk his way out of it." "Both," Wolfe said. "But desperation unbalances intellect. The pattern holds." Saul, perched near the window with his usual cat-like stillness, flicked the curtain an inch. Street's quiet. No cars stopping. You want me to cover the rear, boss? Wolfe nodded once. Indeed. I expect our visitor will feign courtesy before attempting control. Miss Rayner will remain in the kitchen with Fritz, and Mr. Timmins shall remain where he is, silent if possible. Evelyn started to speak but caught my warning look. The last thing we needed was another armed confession. She went out with Fritz, her footsteps softer than her breathing. The room tightened to the sound of the clock. I checked my watch. 17 minutes. Wolfe sat immovable, fingers steepled under his chin. The only motion came from the slow rise of his chest, like the city outside was breathing through him. At exactly 20 minutes, the doorbell rang. I opened it to a man who could have walked straight out of a government portrait. Mid-50s, tailored grey suit, hair brushed to strategic perfection, eyes the polished grey of an old coin. He carried himself like authority was a birthright. "Mr. Hargrove," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He did, with the calm of a man entering his own office. His eyes took in everything, the books, the desk, the absence of clutter, with a flicker of approval that didn't belong to guests. "Mr. Goodwin, I appreciate your discretion. Don't mention it. My boss hates noise." Wolfe didn't rise. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, "your punctuality does you credit, though I must deplore your purpose." Hargrove turned, smiling. "Ah, Mr. Wolfe, I've heard of your distaste for inefficiency. Then let us be brief. You've acquired certain photographic materials that were never intended for public circulation. I'm here to collect them." Wolfe gestured toward the red chair opposite his desk. "Collect them. You speak as though they were misplaced luggage. Sit." Hargrove did, folding his hands over his knee. "Let's avoid dramatics. The images were taken illegally, in violation of international property agreements. Their possession constitutes a federal offense." I said, "That's funny. You didn't mention that when your driver was killing the people who handled them." His eyes slid to me without warmth. "Mr. Reese acted outside his authority." "Sure," I said, "and John Dillinger was misunderstood." Wolfe raised a hand. "Archie, Mr. Hargrove will incriminate himself faster without your assistance." He turned back to our guest. "You claim governmental privilege, yet your name appears on manifests falsifying the return of artworks to owners who never existed. The negatives prove it. That is not misplacement. That is theft, executed under official seal." The smile faded. "You're mistaken. Those records are classified. You have no legal access." "Indeed," Wolfe murmured. "Yet here you are, confirming their authenticity." The silence that followed was fragile, the kind that breaks if anyone breathes wrong. Saul's voice drifted from the hall. "Street's clear. Just you three in here." It was both reassurance and warning. Hargrove leaned forward, voice dropping. "Mr. Wolfe, I know your reputation. You prefer intellect to confrontation. Allow me to propose an arrangement. Return the negatives and the prints, and you'll receive a retainer. Let's say $50,000. Your discretion will remain as always. Impeccable." Wolfe's eyes half closed. "You insult me doubly. First with bribery, then with arithmetic." Hargrove's jaw tightened. "This isn't bribery. It's prudence. You have no idea the political consequences of exposing this. It would destroy institutions, entire programs." "Then let them be destroyed," Wolfe said softly. "They are unfit for existence." I'd seen Wolfe angry before, but this wasn't that. This was colder, a kind of moral precision that could slice through steel. Hargrove rose, face whitening. "You're playing with forces beyond you." "I assure you," Wolfe said, "forces that rely on deceit are beneath me, not beyond." I took a step forward. "Sit down, Hargrove." He hesitated, glanced at my revolver and made a decision. "I don't think so." His hand moved toward his coat. Saul was faster. From the doorway came a single, low command. "Don't." Hargrove froze. Saul's gun was leveled with the ease of habit. Wolfe sighed. "Mr. Goodwin, relieve him of whatever delusion he carries in that pocket." I did. The pistol I pulled from his coat was compact, government issue, and recently oiled. I set it on Wolfe's blotter. "Souvenir from Europe?" Hargrove's voice dropped to a hiss. "You think this changes anything? You have no authority to hold me." "No," Wolfe said, "but I have truth and a telephone. One is lethal to your reputation, the other to your freedom. You may choose which arrives first." He stood immovable as Wolfe reached for the receiver and dialed a number from memory. "Inspector Kramer," he said when the line connected, "I am surrendering into your custody one Daniel L. Hargrove, currently Deputy Director of the Cultural Reclamation Fund, suspected of multiple homicides and grand larceny. Yes, at my address. You might wish to bring a camera. He admires them." Hargrove made a sound halfway between a snarl and a laugh. "You arrogant—" "Enough," Wolfe said sharply. "Sit." He sat, not out of obedience, but because the fight had gone out of him. Within 10 minutes, the street outside filled with the recognizable rumble of official vehicles. Saul faded into the back hall. Fritz reappeared, curious and horrified. Kramer came in first, chewing on a cigar that hadn't been lit in an hour. His eyes swept the room, found Hargrove, and widened just enough to register satisfaction. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "You actually gift-wrapped one." "I prefer precision to ribbon," Wolfe said. Kramer motioned to the uniforms. "Take him." Hargrove rose, still wearing the faint smile of a man who can't believe the curtain's really closing. "You won't understand this, Inspector. None of you will. What we did saved art, preserved history. Spare it," I said. "You preserved yourself." They marched him out. The door closed, and silence returned, soft as fatigue. Kramer turned back to Wolfe. "So what's in this for you, aside from the satisfaction of making my night miserable?" "Nothing beyond the restoration of order," Wolfe said. "You may inform the press that the Bureau's corruption has been excised, though I doubt they will spell my name correctly." Kramer grunted. "They never do. You'll get your thanks in headlines, Wolfe, but don't expect flowers." He turned to me. "And you, next time you bait a killer, try not to do it within city limits." "I'll add that to my etiquette manual," I said. When the door finally shut behind them, Wolfe sagged back into his chair. The clock ticked once, loudly, as if to mark the end. Evelyn stepped out from the kitchen doorway, pale but composed. "Is it over?" "For now," I said. "Your brother's name will be cleared." She nodded, eyes bright with something halfway between relief and disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. Wolfe poured a glass of beer and raised it slightly. "To Mr. Rayner," he said, "who died seeking truth, and to those of us burdened with surviving it." Saul gave a small salute. Fritz exhaled for the first time in an hour. I leaned against the door frame, feeling the tension drain like the last note of a bad song. But Wolfe wasn't done. "Archie," he said quietly, "tomorrow deliver the negatives to Kramer yourself. Then settle our account with Miss Rayner. She will accept no payment, but send one nonetheless. Justice requires its own currency." "Right," I said. "You want that in check or sentiment?" "Both," Wolfe said. "Now leave me. The world has been adequately untangled for one night." He reached for another beer. I watched him for a second. The great Nero Wolfe, serene amid wreckage, the faint hum of triumph under his stillness, and felt the odd calm that follows a storm survived. Wolfe's beer glass was halfway to his lips when the doorbell rang again. The sound was sharp, quick, no hesitation. He froze, sighed once, and set the glass down with deliberate precision. "Our guest," he murmured. Punctuality so rarely survives arrest. I moved to the hallway, revolver loose in my hand. Fritz opened the door before I reached it. Apparently his nerves had found a hobby. Daniel Hargrove stood there, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a man in a trench coat whose cigar smoke had entered before he did. Kramer. He stepped inside like a bull who just remembered where the china cabinet was. "Don't start, Wolfe. We're not here to congratulate you." I said, "That's refreshing. I hate when he blushes." Kramer ignored me, waving the uniforms back outside. "You got lucky this time. Hargrove cracked on the way to the station. Said everything, from the shipments to the killings to your little photo op. You think that clears you?" "I was not aware I required clearing," Wolfe said. "Though I admit, Mr. Hargrove's belated conscience simplifies matters." Kramer leaned on the desk. "You've been holding back evidence, Wolfe. That's obstruction, and don't tell me you were staging a morality play." "I would not dare," Wolfe said smoothly. "My intentions were purely curative. I allowed corruption to expose itself in its natural habitat. Conversation." Kramer snorted. "Yeah, well, you're lucky your boy here didn't end up in a morgue again." "Again?" I said. "I didn't know I'd been yet." "You came close enough. There was a second car waiting on Lexington last night. Reese wasn't working alone." Wolfe's eyebrows rose. "Indeed." Kramer dropped a manila folder on the desk. "We found another body an hour ago, in a warehouse on the East River. Looks like Reese's partner took a bullet in the back. Same caliber he used on Rayner and Kessel. Only this time, the gun was missing." "Poetic symmetry," Wolfe murmured. "An accomplice executed to erase the past. The question, of course, is who performed the erasure." Kramer jabbed the air with his cigar. "That's your problem, Wolfe. You think murder's a puzzle box. It's not. It's rot, and it spreads." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And yet you arrive each morning with the same disinfectant. Handcuffs and optimism." I coughed. "Inspector, if you're done exchanging. Valentine's, can we confirm whether anyone besides Reese was using my name?" Kramer turned to me. "The fake ID we pulled off Reese listed you as the reference. I traced it to a forger who disappeared 3 weeks ago. My bet is Hargrove's money paid for it." "Then the ledger closes," Wolfe said. "Except for one name." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Timmins," Wolfe said, glancing toward the back room. The ex-bodyguard was still seated where we'd left him, hands bound, expression dull as exhaustion. But at Wolfe's voice, something flickered behind his eyes, recognition or guilt. It was hard to tell. Kramer followed Wolfe's gaze. "He's been checked. His alibi holds for both killings." "I doubt he requires one," Wolfe said. "The measure of guilt is not location, but benefit. Mr. Timmins alone knew the full extent of Rayner's correspondence and Kessel's ledgers. And when both men were dead, who remained to inherit that silence? He did. What better way to sell immunity than to appear loyal to the deceased?" Timmins straightened. "That's crazy. Wolfe raised a finger. "Please. The art of denial requires rehearsal. You visited Kessel's penthouse after the murder, claiming to search for evidence. Yet you produced the missing half of the photograph yourself, conveniently preserved. Why not destroy it with the negatives? Because you wish to trade it to me for protection and profit." Timmins' lips parted, but the sound that came out wasn't speech. It was panic dressed as breath. Kramer barked, "You got proof?" "Yes," Wolfe said calmly. "The proof lies in the texture of the envelope itself." That got everyone's attention. Wolfe gestured toward the safe. I retrieved the torn envelope and laid it on the desk. Wolfe pointed to a faint, oily sheen near the edge. "This residue," he said, "is linseed oil, a compound used by art handlers to preserve varnished canvases. Neither Reese nor Hargrove would have touched the photograph with such residue. Mr. Timmins, however, was a guard in Kessel's gallery for 5 years. He handled such materials daily. The envelope passed through his hands before it reached us, proving his possession. Kramer looked impressed despite himself. You saying he was in on it from the start? From the middle, Wolfe corrected. He waited until Rayner's fear made him careless, then passed information to Reese. After Kessel's death, he retrieved what he could and brought it here to ensure his own safety. When that failed, he planned to silence Miss Rayner, as Reese had failed to do. Evelyn gasped softly from the kitchen doorway. Timmins turned toward her, and something in his eyes went mean and final. He lunged, not for Wolfe, not for me, but toward her. The chair toppled, rope snapping against the strain. I moved first, crossing the room in 2 strides. The shot came. From Saul. Clean, controlled, ending it before Timmins could reach her. The room fell still except for the echo crawling up the walls. Kramer exhaled hard. Hell, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. You always save the messiest one for last. Wolfe closed his eyes. Fritz will not be pleased. Blood never comes out of walnut. I holstered my revolver. Call it an occupational hazard. Evelyn stood frozen, face white, eyes wide. I guided her to the couch, and she sat as if gravity had remembered her name. Wolfe looked at her with something that might have been sympathy if he weren't so economical with emotion. Miss Rayner, he said, your brother's work is vindicated. The paintings will be returned to their rightful places. That, I believe, will suffice as epitaph. She nodded faintly. He'd have liked that. Kramer's men carried Timmins out, quiet and efficient. When the door shut behind them, the office felt larger, emptier, the kind of emptiness that follows truth once it's had its say. Wolfe poured another beer, the ritual unbroken. Archie, make a note to send Miss Rayner a certified statement for the archives. Then telephone Mr. Cohen. He will wish to gloat publicly on our behalf. Lon loves a good headline, I said. I'll make sure he spells your name wrong just to keep you humble. That will be difficult, Wolfe murmured. The clock struck 7. The first sunlight found its way through the curtains, touching the rim of Wolfe's glass. He lifted it once, a gesture more than a toast. To order, he said simply. I looked at the empty doorway where Kramer had left and thought of all the noise the night had swallowed. And to luck, I added. Pfui, Wolfe said. Luck is a superstition for men without strategy. He drank. I smiled. The world outside was waking up again, and inside, Wolfe's brownstone returned to its natural state. Quiet, smug, indestructible. Wolfe stayed in the chair as if gravity worked harder for him than anyone else. The first edge of sunrise had settled behind the blinds, brushing gold across the books. It gave him an odd glow, like justice with a paunch. I was still standing by the phone, waiting for Kramer's echo to fade from the line. Well, I said, that wraps it. Hargrove's behind bars, Timmins out of commission, and Miss Rayner's conscience clear. What do we call this one? The case of the unwanted appointment. Pfui, Wolfe said. You're incorrigible. A man dies, another deceives, and you search for titles. It's a hobby. Some people collect stamps. He poured another half-glass of beer, motion slow and deliberate. Titles, he mused, belong to art, and art, as we have observed, is too often stolen. Evelyn was still seated near the fireplace, hands clasped around the cup Fritz had pressed on her. Steam rose faintly, like a surrender flag no one noticed. You mean the paintings? She asked quietly. No, Wolfe said. I mean the truth. It is the only creation mankind refuses to pay for. That line landed heavier than the furniture. For once, I didn't have a comeback. Saul, perched by the wall, gave a small grunt. Kramer's got enough to tie this up with a bow, he said. Press will make it sound like a spy ring. Let them, Wolfe murmured. The truth will filter through however much ink is wasted covering it. He turned his gaze toward Evelyn. Miss Rayner, Your brother's photographs will be restored to the public record. His name will follow them. If that is small comfort, it is nonetheless all the world provides." She nodded, eyes wet but steady. "It's more than he ever had while alive." "Then we have done enough," Wolfe said. Fritz reappeared with a tray. Coffee for me, beer for Wolfe, tea for the lady. The domestic rhythm returned like a clock rewinding. Saul stretched, muttered something about sleep, and slipped out the door without noise. The case had emptied itself, and the room breathed again. I sat opposite Wolfe and studied him across the desk. "You know, if you'd ever write a book on how to bait killers using furniture and logic, you'd make a fortune." "I have no desire to instruct amateurs," he said, "nor to glorify what should remain private." "Come on, it's a good story." He looked at me over the rim of his glass. "Then you tell it." "You always do." He wasn't wrong. I scribble things in my head while he thinks in Latin. That's how we stay balanced, me moving, him immovable. Evelyn stood then, setting her cup down gently. "I should go," she said. "There's a lot to settle. Lawyers, galleries, statements." Wolfe inclined his head. "Fritz will call a cab." She paused at the door, then turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, thank you for believing me, even when I didn't make it easy." "That's my job," I said. "We believe the impossible until Wolfe disproves it." Her smile was small, tired, but real. "Your friend's right. You should write it down." "Maybe I will," I said. And she was gone, her steps fading down the hall like punctuation at the end of a chapter. The house settled into its normal quiet. Fritz in the kitchen humming something operatic. Wolfe flipping open a book thicker than most people's patience. The smell of orchids crept faintly from the plant rooms upstairs, sweet and smug. I lit a cigarette and said, "You ever get tired of being right?" He didn't look up. "No." That's what I thought. He turned a page, eyes flicking to the margin as though the sentence offended him. "Archie, I'm right only when others insist on being wrong. It is not a triumph, it is a necessity." Spoken like a man allergic to applause. He grunted. "Applause is a waste of sound." I blew smoke toward the ceiling fan. "So what was it all about in the end? Money, power, or just the thrill of holding something the world wasn't supposed to see?" "Vanity," he said. "The oldest motive, the most resilient. Mr. Hargrove stole art to preserve his own reflection in it. Rayner photographed truth for the same reason, to prove he was part of it. The difference is that one man died for honesty, the other for deception." I let that sink in. Wolfe always ends cases like sermons, except his religion is logic and his God refuses worship. He closed the book, signaling conversation's end. "You will deliver the statement and negatives at 10, he said. "Then you will acquire cigars. I've exhausted the tolerable supply." "Yes, sir," I said. He picked up the last of the beer, took a thoughtful sip and leaned back. "And Archie?" "Yeah?" "Do not schedule any appointments under your name for the foreseeable future." I grinned. "Not even lunch dates?" "Especially those." The morning light had fully claimed the room now, brushing dust motes across the carpet, catching the lines in Wolfe's face that only thought ever carved. I turned off the desk lamp, pocketed my notebook, and headed for the door. Behind me, his voice followed, half command, half afterthought. "Archie, still here. You were almost shot 4 times. Try not to improve upon the number." "Understood." He went back to reading. I went back to being alive, which in our business counts as a victory. Out on the stoop, the street was fresh from the night's rain, the air cool and clean. The city had shrugged off another secret, and the world was back to pretending it made sense. I lit another cigarette and watched a cab turn the corner. Somewhere behind those walls, Wolfe was already lost in thought, arranging words and motives into the neat geometry of justice. For me, it was enough to breathe, to think of breakfast, and to let the smoke trail upward like punctuation on the story Wolfe would never write.